What a difference a week makes. Just 7 days ago, we were watching Max Verstappen win the Japanese Grand Prix for Red Bull. Today, he was nowhere in Bahrain. Finished sixth, spent a lot of the afternoon battling with midfielders and had to pass Pierre Gasly's Alpine for sixth on the last lap. Meanwhile, as expected, Oscar Piastri led from start to finish, and even Ferrari and Mercedes could at least fight with Lando Norris in the second McLaren. So, John, why is Red Bull so much worse in Bahrain compared to Japan?
I think it's a weekend that's exposed all those kind of the weaknesses in the car are kind of blown apart by this track, basically. We know the car's got this kind of through corner balance problem. There's this disconnect, it's got kind of turn in oversteer, shifts to understeer on the way out, this disconnect that they've talked about through last year and into this year. And what that does is then the tyres are sliding a little bit. So if you're in a weekend where tyre temperatures are a problem, the car starts sliding, it loses performance, it loses even more performance, and the whole thing just spirals out of control. Then you're into a performance management problem, you're dropping back, and that's primarily the problem. But it wasn't just this disconnect problem today. There were some other big issues as well, weren't there?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think this was a track that played to its weaknesses while Suzuka played to the strengths. But yeah, there were several specific problems. One of those was a braking field problem. Max Verstappen and Yuki Tsunoda are having all sorts of problems. Now, Red Bull aren't too worried about that. It was a problem. It's a braking system issue, a mechanical issue, not down to temperature management or anything, but they're pretty happy they can fix that. It's something that they understand. So what they're telling us is they're not too concerned. The other problem was the pit stops went wrong. Now, people will have seen that the traffic light stayed on, the red lights. Now, what Christian Horner, the Red Bull team principal, told us was that there was some kind of wiring loom problem, and that led to the red lights not going out, both for Verstappen and Tsunoda's first stop. They didn't know that was the problem. And because those stops were so close together, of course, they did Verstappen's. They thought, oh, probably it was finger trouble. Then Tsunoda had it, and they thought, oh, no, it's a system problem. And of course, Verstappen as well, supplementary to that, at a later stop, he had the front right wheel gun. It needed 3 bites to get the wheel gun on. Now, those are specific weekend problems, and that didn't help, and that meant that Verstappen was having to work hard in the race. But it's coming back always to this balance problem with the car. They had the problems last year. They've had problems this year. So the big question is, can they fix it? Are there going to be enough races like Suzuka where it's masked, or is this the real picture? And how can they actually make enough progress to stay in this fight?
It can be fixed, but it's not an overnight fix. I think it's far more than just trying to kind of nail a setup. I think they can kind of mitigate some of the weaknesses. If we have a track like Suzuka, for example, with low tyre deck, low temperatures as well, because then you get more tyre grip, you're getting more downforce in the car. It kind of masks the problems. But setup-wise, it's still there. The disconnect is still there. It gets worse at hot races. It's worse when the tyre temps go up. And it basically needs an aero solution. You've got to try to sort out this shift of aero balances going through corners. There's a shift of mechanical balance, and they're playing these extremes. It's something they had last year. We heard endless times last year, Max and Sergio Perez talking about this disconnect. It was something they focused on over the winter. They tried to broaden the setup window. From what I understand from people inside the team, that they've cured, they say 25% of what they want to get to. So there's an awful lot to do. The question is, how can they get on top of it? They need to understand what the problem is. I spoke to Max Verstappen tonight and said, are you understanding it? Are you making progress? He just shrugged his shoulders and said it's hit and miss. That sometimes they seem to get the car in the right window like Japan. Here, totally out there. So it's very up and down.
And what's really interesting is to look at what the root cause of the problem is. Now, Red Bull say they understand the problem, but you can understand the symptoms and you can understand some stages of the cause, but it doesn't necessarily mean you can cure it. Now, we know they've had wind tunnel problems, and obviously this balancing, the need to get a car that's well balanced across a wide speed range, very, very challenging. We know that flexible bodywork helps this, and there's been a lot of controversy about that, rear wing and front wing. And we know we've got race 9 in Spain, that technical directive kicks in, and Red Bull are hoping that will help them a little bit. But do Red Bull have the tools to actually fix this? Because this sounds a lot like last year's problems. They are related to it. Fixing 25% of the problems with a move from one car to another doesn't sound like enough for me. That rate of progress is not quick enough.
I think from what kind of you're kind of gauging what the team is saying. I mean, Christian Horner tonight, for the first time this season's talked about this wind tunnel correlation problem. It was the same kind of comments, same stories of last year. It's like wearing 2 watches. There's what the track's telling you. There's what the wind tunnel and CFD is telling you, and it's 2 different times. You don't know what to trust. And I think that's because they got the kind of evidence data from the first races. gone back to the factory to try to get a grip on what's happening, and the answers aren't there. I think one of the problems for them is their old wind tunnel. It's sophisticated, it's been modernised. Inside it can give the tools. In a regulation era where you go in the wind tunnel, you find improvements, you're getting 10 points of downforce, 20 points of downforce, it's fine, but the margins now are so small, and you're chasing a very fine aero balance problem. And the biggest weakness, from what I understand about their wind tunnel, is it's temperature sensitive. It's not insulated like some of the modern facilities. So if it's very cold, it's pretty useless. If it's super hot outside, it's pretty useless. But worse than that is the kind of data and feedback varies based on how hot it is. So you're not getting consistent feedback, which makes it really hard to do experiments. So you run the same car 3 times through the wind tunnel, you get 3 different answers, and you don't know which one's correct.
Exactly, and you need to be super precise to make any of this work at the moment. It's incredibly difficult, and I'm sceptical about whether Red Bull can actually make enough progress to do it. It probably will turn on so quite a bit of action going on behind us as they tear down the paddock, as you probably could hear and maybe see behind us. But yeah, I am very sceptical about whether they can actually make enough progress, because they didn't make a big enough step last year. The new wind tunnel, of course, is in build. It's ahead of schedule, but they're not going to have that till 2027. So really, championship-wise, it's, for the moment, we're in a phase where Verstappen just has to make the best of it. He's 8 points now behind Lando Norris. So he's got to make sure on weekends like Suzuka, he takes the win. If 6 is the best he can do on a weekend like this, he keeps doing it, get to Spain, hope things change, and then you can be in a straight fight. But it feels like they're hoping for a little bit too much there.
Yeah, I think the thing with the car balance, and I think as we see with McLaren this weekend, Oscar Piastri, and the McLaren generally this year, when you nail the balance and the car's performing beautifully, you can look after the tyres, and it's exponential almost, the pace goes. I think Red Bull have this belief that if they can nail this problem with the car, and especially on the corner entry, if they can dial out this oversteer element, so tame that without that then triggering even worse oversteer on the way out, then there'll be big gains to come. But you're dealing with such small kind of areas of performance, you're dealing with very finite aero elements, and it's also very, very complicated because front wings are flexing down a bit, rear wings backing off a bit, the aerodynamic loads are varying quite a bit. There's a shift between low corner ride height, high corner or high speed ride heights, end of straight performance. I think there's so many variables, and you can't run these ground effect cars at the speed they are really at and how close to the ground they are in reality in the tunnel. So I think this is why Max talked about hit and miss, because it's almost guesswork to some extent. You get your data, you try it out, doesn't work, you've got to try something else.
And actually, Max Verstappen, even though the result was disappointing today, he did well, I think, to salvage that 6th place. And the reason he could salvage only 6 was because the Mercedes cars were quick, the Ferraris were quick. Lewis Hamilton struggled in qualifying, but still came through. And it was a tough race, but Verstappen still maximised it. And that's the big worry for Red Bull, because Max Verstappen, on good form, even with a few hindrances, still could only manage 6. So that's the big problem. So they are just depending now on Verstappen hanging on in there until they fix the problem, or until it just gets too far into the season. They're not going to.
Well, I think maybe this weekend too, the braking characteristics of this track, that it's one of the heaviest, most demanding braking circuits of the season. Very, very heavy braking into turn 1, for example. I think this is an area where the Red Bull's been strong against the opposition, but I think it's maybe gone too far this weekend. It's been problematic, and that's cost them an awful lot of performance. So I think we can see strengths of this Red Bull in the high speed stuff of Suzuka, for example. It can be balanced. When it's in the window, it can be balanced, and Max can hustle it, and he can get the gains. And we saw in Suzuka the final chicane, brilliant on the brakes. It's nailed him pole position. So I think on the days that the tyre deck's not too bad, the days they aren't having to worry about tyre overheating, the tracks where there's not masses and masses of braking to catch them out, it can get in the window, but they definitely need a step. That car needs to improve if they're going to have any hope of fighting for this World Championship.
Absolutely. Off to Saudi next weekend, high-speed circuit, a few slow corners though, can be quite testing on tyres sometimes as well with the temperature, so they'll be probably doing somewhere in between Suzuka and what we saw here there.